Hello everybody, my name is Peter Day. I am a Director and Principal Designer at Motive Brand Design, and we've been tasked with creating a new visual identity for SA Heart. So just to start off with, just a little bit about what is a visual brand basically. So most people, or a lot of people, consider a brand to be, in its most basic form, a collection of basically visible assets. So things like logos, colours, images, and these are the assets which form the brand's visual identity. They are, however, only a really small part of what makes a brand, as we've touched upon before with all the stuff about social media and brand ambassadorship. Hopefully everyone's got an understanding that it extends beyond just the visual assets to a much greater degree. So brand is also made up of a spoken and written language and lots of other non-tangible assets. And it's a successful combination of all of these things which help to create the brand's personality with which the consumer can engage. Hopefully this therefore creates positive emotional responses and rewards through day-to-day interactions with the brand. So these interactions can be as varied as the way a consumer feels about a logo, the way they greet it on the phone, or experience of navigating the company's website. So ultimately, it's the consumer's response to these interactions and opinion they form which determines how the brand is perceived. And it's this perception of the brand which in turn determines its success. So the new identity for SA Heart, the aim is to establish the personality and core values in a visual format. And our key goals for the rebrand were to create an identity that was strong, contemporary, talks of professionalism and expertise, was approachable, is viewed as a clear leader in its field, and sets ourselves apart from other people in the same area, and is patient-focused. We've tried to reinforce these qualities through consistent application of branding as well. So before we get into showing you the visuals of what everything looks like, I'd just like to talk a bit about consistency, because I know Nicole's very keen to enforce this message. So the consistency application and usage is basically key in creating and forming that really, really strong core. If we use things incorrectly, so if we use logos incorrectly, we decide we don't like the symbol of the logo here, we'd like to move it around. We quite like to use a different font. We'd like to use things on colours that aren't appropriate. In the same way with social media where, there's grey areas, this is reasonably black and white in that when we create the brand, as we have, it will be rolled out in conjunction with a style guide. So any usage of the brand going forward needs to be used in conjunction with that. And anything that doesn't should be basically dismissed. It should also, even if it has been used in conjunction with a set style guide, it needs to be run past basically a brand custodian from within the organisation in order to basically sign off on that and give it its tick of approval before anything becomes published or becomes put into the public domain. Okay, so I'm going to just basically jump nearly there to jumping straight into actually showing you what we did. So the wide variety of services provided by SA Heart meant that for us to focus on one aspect of the services provided would be to the detriment of all the others. And as such, we basically chose to focus on the elements central to all activities. And as such, we'll see what that is in a second. It's getting there. Yeah, there you go. So basically, this isn't obviously an abstract representation of the cardiovascular system. So the heart being key to the activities of SA Heart, we thought that was obviously the logical place to start. We didn't want to go with anything corny in relation to a heart, so this was basically felt to be an abstract interpretation was the better way to go. In addition to obviously just being a representation of a heart as well, there's an infinity loop within the symbol, and the idea with that is to basically represent the continuity of care that SA Heart provides. Obviously, we mentioned about trying to form an emotional response from our consumers, and the hope with this would be that that continuity of care is emphasised strongly throughout all visual material that SA Heart provides. So you'll see there's a revised colour palette here. The red is retained to a degree because we wanted to have that inference to the heritage of SI Heart and the older logo that was there, but we've basically greatly expanded the colour palette that can be used. So previously, obviously, we had the dark grey and the red, and that was about it, really. Whereas with this particular logo, we have a wide range from purples to reds through to kind of almost lilac colours. And we've also, when we get to it, we'll see that there's a neutral colour palette which we can use as well. So this is basically the logo in one of its configurations. When it's released, there'll be lots of different configurations of this. Mostly that in a day-to-day basis, there'll be probably one or two configurations that anybody who's authorised to actually create corporate collateral will be using, and we'll probably have some special exceptions for things like uniforms, for publicity material, etc., where we have to basically alter the configuration but in an authorised manner. So there we're just showing the positive configuration of the logo. Hopefully we'll be going to the next slide soon. Just a standard vertical configuration of the logo. The same configuration positive. And then we just get into mono representations as well. So these are things that will be used for things like press adverts and applications where, you know, full color isn't required. With regard to the color palette, we'll get back into that again. So as I mentioned before, these are basically just kind of stock standard colors that will be used. Because of the wide variety of colors that there are, what we normally do is we'll provide various different options for these. So using them in CMYK printing, which would be used for things like press ads, magazines, corporate folders, business cards, etc. We'll provide you with a red, green and blue color palette, which is have hex values as well for using in on-screen presentations on the internet. And also we've got a more muted color palette, which is kind of greys and silvers and things like that, which is in some corporate applications a more subdued look and feel might be required. This is the new corporate typeface. Now, with font licensing, they're usually reasonably expensive to buy lots and lots of licenses for fonts like this. So I'm assuming that when this font typeface is rolled out, it will only be within authorised marketing personnel who have access to that. And what we normally do with brand rollouts like this is for internal use for things like letterheads, PowerPoint presentations, etc., we'll actually use a generic typeface that's available usually in a Microsoft system, which we'll use as an accompanying font to the correct corporate font, just for using for things like body text. So the reason we chose this font is that primarily it's a nice friendly font. It's more modern than what is in existence as well, and it is also available in a really wide range of font weights. So in addition to the sans serif version which we have here, there's also a serif version to the font. This would not be used in general release. This is probably more for more formal things, like if there were official invitations or things like that. And then we get into, now, before we, these all look like real things, but at the moment these are purely conceptual. So some of these things will probably come to eventuality. Some of them may not, and they may be tweaked in between here and when they are. So yeah, so we mentioned about things like corporate, more subdued things. So we've basically shown here, in the business cards, we just did a version which was on a silver with a silver metallic emboss on the back of it. So that's just an option in case somebody didn't want to have the full colour. Looking at some uniform possibilities. Again, as I mentioned before, not set in stone, but just to give you guys an idea of what things might look like. Possible sporting applications. Possible corporate vehicles. And then getting into the interior, so I know that the office is having a refit, so these are just some concept ideas of what the new reception wall may look like, whether it be just on a white wall, on a dark, and then some slight variations thereof. And the idea being that if we were to do that, we can possibly make the signage slightly 3D, back illuminated. There's all sorts of things we can do with this, basically. Again, using it on things like safety decals and exterior signage. Yeah, that's me. There we go. All good.